Keynote session today. We have a special guest today for the fourth keynote. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the fourth keynote speech for today. Let me introduce to all of you our fourth keynote speaker, Dr. Ahmad Muhammad, with his keynote entitled Global Perspective on Sustainable Educational Leadership for Future-Ready Education Systems. So currently, Dr. Ahmad Muhammad is the Minister of State for Education, Ministry of Education, Maldives. Dr. Ahmad Muhammad is an inspiring Maldivian education leader and researcher, visionary and dedicated to transform and nurture schools on both learning and humanity. With a career spanning from classroom leadership, university scholarship, and national education policy, Dr. Ahmad has become a powerful voice for equity, innovation, and inclusion across the Maldives. Currently serving with the Maldives National University and the Ministry of Education, he blends strategic insight with deep compassion, helping educators and leaders reimagine what's possible for every learner. His research in educational leadership and organizational behavior has influenced practice and policy alike, inspiring change rooted in purpose and connection. Beautiful. Dr. Ahmad believes that true education goes beyond achievement. It's about belonging, curiosity, and courage. Great. Through his work, he continues to shape a generation of educators and students ready to lead with integrity and hope. So with a round of applause, let us welcome Dr. Ahmad Muhammad to the stage.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Directors of IAB branches, management of Institut of Aminuddin Baki, conference chair, members of organizing committee, and senior officials and lecturers of IAB, keynote speakers, best practice speakers, presenters, and also the participants of ICELAM 2025. Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. It is actually an honor for me to attend and speak in this important, significant conference. And so I would like to thank the management of IAB for giving me this opportunity to contribute to the fourth ICELAM held in 2025. Let me start my journey towards ICELAM 2025. When I was a master's student in 2010 and 2011, at University Malaya, I came to know about a very specific conference related to educational leadership and management organized by Institute of Aminuddin Baki at that time, long back. And then I decided to go to this conference, but it was not held in IAB Gantin headquarters. It was in Northern Campus in Kedah. So I approached my two other fellow colleagues who were studying with me at the University of Malaya. Dr. Vishal is here, and together with Dr. Vishal and also one of my colleagues, three of us we went to ICELAM, because at the time it was like title as Regional Conference on Educational Leadership and Management. I guess this conference started back in 2009, and I had the opportunity to attend the second conference in 2011. And it is a great pleasure. And I would sincerely say that this conference impacted a lot to my knowledge and also my leadership practices that I have been practicing during the past years, more than a decade. And then I decided one thing, to attend all the ICELAM conferences. And then in 2013, again, attended the third ICELAM, which was held in, I guess, in Genting Highland. And also the fourth one in 2015. And after 10 years of time, again, it is a privilege to stand here as a keynote speaker to address you about my experiences. So this is a typical but a very memorable journey of attending ICELAM, and this created a connection with IAB. So it is always a pleasure to contribute, and also now we have a close connection with IAB and the Ministry of Education. And recently, some of our principals, they visited IAB, and hopefully in the near future, again, a batch of principals will come here and then learn from the Malaysian context, especially how you manage the schools. Going back to the title of my keynote speech, the global perspectives on sustainable educational leadership for future-ready education systems, I'm going to explore how global perspectives are shaping leadership practices to build a future-ready education systems that are more inclusive, innovative, and resilient. And throughout my talk, I'll try to address four major key components. The first one is how we define sustainable educational leadership, because we are very familiar with sustainable leadership. But how this sustainable leadership is used in the context of education, that is something we have to explore further, not only in our leadership practices, but also when our scholars do research. This is one of the areas we have to research, because there is dearth of research in this area, even if you look at the different databases. And the global research on sustainable educational leadership, that is also another area I'm going to explore further. And also the crucial area, the leadership development. How this leadership development is linked, connected with sustainable educational leadership. Finally, the connection with the future-ready education systems in the sustainable educational leadership. So when we ask this question, what is sustainable educational leadership, there are different centers for research in this area. I think in Cambridge, there is a center for research, and also there is another center for research on sustainable leadership at Mahidol University in Thailand. And when I searched the Facebook page of Mahidol Center for Research on Sustainable Leadership, a very recent post posted on 1st of October this month. They mentioned that sustainable leadership is all about developing value-based, self-reinforcing systems that govern sustainable organizations. So from this definition and how they try to define it, we understand how this is linked, how this is connected with the theme of this ICELAM, the fourth ICELAM, which says value-driven leadership in the world of education. And we know that one of the key components of sustainable educational leadership is developing a value-based system within the schools, within the education system, and go beyond the schools and the systems. Even in today's opening ceremony, the Minister of Education of Malaysia mentioned that integrity is the compass for the sustainable leadership. That is something we believe. The belief, the integrity, honesty, this is something we need to inculcate in all our leaders, both school leaders and also the system leaders. Looking at the report produced by Professor David Grew to the Commonwealth Secretariat on the outcomes of forum held to the 21st Commonwealth Conference on Education Ministers. The report on educational leadership for innovation, growth, and sustainability, the author recommended 5 major areas. And one of the areas is the leadership. And when we read the recommendations of this report, we can clearly identify that under the leadership, the author wrote, support the value-based development and preparedness of aspiring principals and the current education leaders for collaborative, responsive, crisis-ready, and contextually sensitive practice, and for future schools that are inclusive, integrated in the community. Even from this recommendation statement, we clearly understand that it is important for all of us, especially the system leaders, the superintendents, or the regional heads, and also the people who are working at the system level to support all our school principals to develop a value-based, and we are responsible to prepare inspiring principals with these values. And also, we should understand that the collaboration, the responsive, and also the crisis-ready, and also the contextually sensitive, more specifically about the future schools, which indicates that another important key element of sustainable education leadership is the future orientation. So both value-based systems and also the future-oriented school systems, that's again at the core, at the heart of the sustainable educational leadership. So looking back to one of the important research done in the area of sustainable leadership, Henry Hargreaves mentioned that sustainable educational leadership and improvement preserves and develops a deep learning for all the spreads and lasts in ways that no harm to and indeed create positive benefit for others around us now and in the future. So in this research article, drawing on research of 30 years of educational leadership in 8 US and also in Canadian high schools, as well as on their in their engagement with literature on environmental and corporate sustainability, they define sustainable leadership in such a way. And if you look at the ones in the red color, which shows the words like loss, benefit for others in the future, with indicates the long-lasting impact. This is again going to be the third key component of sustainable educational leadership. In this research, the Henry Hargreaves mentioned 7 principles of sustainability in educational change and leadership. And the first one is the sustainable leadership methods, where it demonstrates that it preserves, protects, and promotes in education what itself sustaining is an enrichment of life. And also when you look at the second principle, educational leadership laws, which shows that it preserves and advances the most valuable aspect of life over time, year upon year, from one leader to the next leader. And the challenge of the leadership succession of leading across and beyond individual leaders over time are the very heart of sustainable leadership and educational change. So that's again reminding us the importance of succession planning, both within the schools and within the systems. The third principle is the sustainable leadership spreads. It sustains as well as develops on the leadership of others. In a complex world, no one leader, institution, or nation can control everything without help. And sustainable leadership is distributed. This is again something we are going to talk and we are going to explore more. And probably in our master class, we will look at the leadership development, the teacher development, how crucial teacher development is. Because when we talk about the distributed leadership, it is all about sharing leadership. When we talk about the sustainable educational leadership, it's not only a one leader, it's not a heroic leader. We need many more leaders to serve the system and the nation. So if you look at the sustainable leadership that spreads, we talk about distributed leadership, and also we talk about empowering the middle leaders. The fourth one is the sustainable does not harm to and actively improves the surrounding environment. Looking back to the sixth and seventh, the sixth one is the sustainable leadership promotes cohesive diversity, which indicates that strong systems are biodiverse ones, and strong organizations also promote diversity and avoid standardization that weakens learning, adaptability, and resilience in the face of unexpected challenges and threats. So this type of leadership, or this approach of leadership, is something really crucial for the time of crisis. This is again important for the changing world. This is important for the complex world that we are going to face even today and in future. So the last one, the seventh principle, is sustainable leadership develops and does not deplete material and human resources, which shows that sustainable leadership recognizes, rewards the organization's leadership talent in earlier rather than later career. It takes care of its leaders by encouraging them to take care of themselves. Therefore, it is important for the leaders to practice and consider their own beliefs, their own values, and also the values related to integrity, honesty, compassion, and all other values needed for tomorrow's schools. This is a very recent study published in 2025. and they use number of articles published, and also in this research, they reviewed almost about 11 different definitions to come up with sustainable leadership in education. So this is a systematic review and an analysis, and this is how the authors define sustainable leadership in education as a dynamic, multifaceted paradigm characterized by its foundational emphasis on effectiveness and long-term impact. And also, the authors came up with 7 distinct themes, and these 7 distinct themes were further consolidated into 3 meta-themes. The first one is effectiveness and impact. So if we talk about the sustainable educational leadership, the impact, this is what I mentioned earlier, the long-lasting impact, that is one of the key elements of sustainable educational leadership. And undoubtedly, the sustainability and system thinking is part of it, but very clearly and distinctly, they highlighted the future-focused theme, which is collaborative responsibility and future orientation. So out of these 5 distinct themes and broad major meta-themes, we understand that the sustainable educational leadership has very distinct core elements. That's the long-lasting impact, future-focused orientation, and also the value-based system that the leaders have to develop. So based on all these sort of research work, and also the published documents, this is how I define sustainable educational leadership. As a future-focused leadership approach, I don't want to say it's a type of leadership, but I rather prefer as an approach of leadership, and which is characterized by dynamic and also multifaceted paradigm. And the fourth element is developing a value-based and self-reinforcing system that governs sustainable educational systems with emphasis on long-term impact. So basically, the 5 different colors that I use in the proposed definition are 5 different key areas that must be incorporated into the sustainable educational leadership when we try to define it, when we try to conceptualize it, and I urge all the scholars in here to further explore and also explore not only the definition, but also try to explore how we use it in our school system. Because now we are living in a complex world. We are living in an uncertain world. We are living in a world that is ever changing very fast. So our school leaders, our school principals, they can't rely on the leadership practices that they use at the current time. They have to revolutionize, or they have to evolutionize the leadership practices. They have to have a futuristic thinking. They have to understand and they have to use the long-term and future orientation thinking when they try to manage and lead schools. So basically, these are the leadership types or leadership perspectives that our school principals use. And commonly used one is the transformational leadership and also the instructional leadership. But at the meantime, many of us advocate for the distributed leadership as well. So during my PhD, I try to explore combining these different leadership styles and how it is used in our Maldivian context. And I frame it in a way that it is more of integrated type of leadership. So based on all these perspectives, you can clearly identify that each and every perspective has a very different focus. For example, if it is the instructional leadership, focus on the school's core business of teaching and learning and the achievement of the students. And if you look at the transformational leadership, it is more towards with the commitment of colleagues, commitment of and leading change, and also improving the performance of the school from all aspects. And the moral leadership, which emphasizes on the values, the visions, and also the ethical leadership. So likewise, if we go and look into the sustainable educational leadership, this is what I believe the focus of sustainable educational leadership must be developing a value-based and collaborative system for long-term impact with future orientation. So each and every leadership approach differs, and it differs with a very different focus. So let's move on to the global research in this area. And on one of the study about the, this is the title of the study, Towards a Model for Sustainable Leadership in Educational Contexts, a moderated mediated analysis of UAE and Hong Kong, the authors, they reviewed a lot of papers and they conceptualized or they came up with a model of sustainable leadership in educational context. And these are the 5 very key important areas they highlighted in this model, the professional growth of principals. Because today we heard about the values, the personal values and also the professional values. And even all our school principals and all leaders, they must invest in their professional growth. This is something important for future. This is important for sustainable leadership. Unless they engage in learning, they don't get the growth. So all of us, we should invest, we should engage in our personal and also professional growth, which is important for sustainable educational leadership. And then the collaborative practices. Because sustainable leadership, education leadership approach is more of a relational approach. It is more of a collaborative approach. It is not a single leader. It's all about producing and working with many leaders in the school environment. And definitely, even though we practice this sustainable educational leadership, we cannot ignore student learning. Because the student learning always comes at the first. The student learning is the heart of all our educational policies and all our educational reforms. And the school culture with many other values, and finally, the distributed leadership. When we look at this study conducted in 2 different countries, UAE and Hong Kong, the findings reveal an average level of sustainable leadership practices in both countries, with the UAE demonstrating higher scores across most variables attributed to its national sustainability agenda and also Vision 2030 education policies, which emphasizes collaborative leadership in the context of UAE. In contrast, Hong Kong's competitive examination-oriented systems resulted in lower scores across most variables, except for the professional development, which was slightly higher than that of UAE. But if you look at the mediating variables, the three mediating variables, school culture, distributed leadership, and professional development play critical mediating roles in this relationship between collaborative practices and sustainable leadership practices. So we understand that collaborative practices is important predictor of this sustainable leadership practices in educational context. And then I thought of doing a bibliometric analysis on this topic, sustainable educational leadership, and then use the Scopus database, and I use these keywords or these terms in my search: sustainable leadership, education, sustainable educational leadership, or sustainable leadership education. From this one, we can clearly identify 10 different key concepts. If you look at the center one, which is in blue color, light blue color, it shows more of sustainable leadership competencies. And also, if we look at the furthest one, from that one, the brown one, which is more related to technology and sustainability in sports. And if you look at the dark blue one, this is more of a trending area of research, using emotional intelligence, using artificial intelligence in relation with sustainable education leadership. And if we look at the rest of other key concepts, which we can clearly identify from the published papers, the green color, which is far from the center, but it shows different leadership models and leadership styles. And interestingly, many people, they use Islamic leadership, transformational leadership, charismatic leadership when they studied about the sustainability and also the sustainable leadership or sustainability in education. And if you look at the purple color cluster, this cluster shows the importance of leadership development and lifelong learning, which is something I have highlighted about the distributed leadership, sharing leadership, and also developing our school principles with value-based systems, and also the lifelong learning, which is more related with the professional and personal growth. And interestingly, there is one cluster in pink color, which shows the studies conducted in Malaysia and more related with the leadership in rural Malaysian schools. And they try to explore how this sustainability in rural Malaysian schools in relation with the leadership practices. So each and every cluster shows key concepts and how these key concepts are related with each and other concepts are shown on the graph on the other side. If you look at the trending concepts within the major area, if you look at the yellow circles, for example, the curriculum development, artificial intelligence, learning, emotional intelligence, and also the sustainability in higher education institutions in relation with the leadership styles. These are key areas, trending areas for our future research. Looking back to the schools of thought or the intellectual structure within all these published almost 150 papers that we used in the bibliometric analysis, we identified 5 different intellectual structures within all these 150 papers. And the first one is the higher education and institutional sustainability. The second one is the Islamic perspectives on ethics and governance. And the third one is learning and organizational development. The fourth area is sustainable leadership and value-based management. And the fifth one is the systems and policy approach to sustainability sciences. So from these different 5 schools of thought, or 5 different intellectual structures within the published research papers, we can clearly link and we can clearly connect the definition of the sustainable educational leadership with all the major domains that I highlighted earlier. So the leadership development is something really important. As I mentioned, shared leadership is going to be a part of sustainable educational leadership, or which is also going to be a kind of a foundational base for it. Because leadership practices need to come from many more people than just those in formal leadership positions. And this is what we talk about the middle leaders, and also the teacher leaders. But still, there is a difference in how we define middle leaders and how we define teacher leaders. Middle leaders in schools will typically have a formal leadership role alongside a substantial teaching role. But the teacher leadership has been defined very differently across literature. Even if you look at the work of Yorkberg and Duke, it is regarded as a process by which teachers, individuals, and collectively influence their colleagues, principals, and other members of the school communities to improve teaching and learning practices with the aim of increase student learning and achievement. And over a decade later, based on the different work of the Yorkberg and Duke, they view the teacher leadership, and also based on the work of the Wen and Campbell, they also attempted to narrow down the focus of teacher leadership, and this is how they define it: teachers who maintain K-12 classroom-based teaching responsibilities while also taking on leadership responsibilities out of classroom. So, if you look at the GEMS report, the Global Education Monitoring Report recently published by the UNESCO, which is titled in Leadership in Education, Lead for Learning, 2024-2025 report. This report has many different chapters, and if you read the chapter 4, it's all about shared school leadership. And if you look at the key elements, this chapter mentions that school leadership often remains hierarchical and limit stakeholders' engagement, and principals do not receive enough preparation for fostering collaboration. And also teachers need leadership training and also autonomy. Looking at this picture, with a very significant finding, almost half of principals in richer countries have no training before starting their jobs as school principals. So looking at the GEMS report, this report also shows that nearly half of principals in high-income countries receive no pre-service training, and also 31% of countries require induction for newcomer principals. And also the principals have often to improve to get up to speed, and also an interview for a background paper on leadership competencies in sub-Saharan Africa for GEM report. One principal said that, when I became a principal, I did not receive training. Instead, I used my experience and knowledge which I gained from being a teacher. And also another principal said that he attended courses on management at a university. So we should understand that the pre-service training for our school leaders, the school principals, and also for the middle leaders, that's something really crucial. Because without prior training, principals, they have to rely on other school principals acting as their peer mentors, or they have to attend ad hoc workshops, or they have to engage with different WhatsApp groups to plug with the gaps. So looking at this report, there are certain areas which were explored and presented. For example, the extent of principal preparation before appointment varies between countries. The school leaders who have only been trained to be good teachers are insufficiently prepared for their role. This is something we should believe. In the 2018 tallies shows that 88 of lower secondary school principals, they had at some point in their career completed a program or course that included school administration or principal training as one of the elements. But only 30% of principals had completed a program of course before they took on their job, and 24% did so before and after they took their duties, and 34% did so only after they started. If you look at some of the countries like Bulgaria or Mexico or Netherlands were among the countries where fewer than one in 5 principals had followed a program or course in school administration before taking up the position. And also among the principals, about like 15% express a high level of need for training on equity and diversity, and also 28% mention about the use of data, and also 28% of principals mention on the teacher collaboration. So we understand that relatively few principals begin their tenure having done a course in school administration. Therefore, leadership preparation and development is needed. However, it differs between countries. The pre-service training programs for aspiring principals, induction and initial programs for novice principals, and continued professional development programs for those who are already in position, including those based in hands-on practical experiences. If you look at the China, new principals must attend and complete 300 hours of training program, while every in-service principal must complete a minimum of 360 hours of training every 5 years in authorized training institutions. So we also know that the principal preparation often not go beyond the theoretical knowledge. Therefore, it is important to incorporate like the internships or the mentoring and hands-on experience in a real school setting when we try to prepare school principals. If we look at the middle management, this is what I have already mentioned. Even the Professor David Grew, on one of the papers, the paper titled Teacher and Middle Leader Research, Consideration and Possibilities, mention about the impact. The teacher and middle leaders can impact significantly on students, teachers, and schools. This is the component we talk about the long-lasting impact. the long-lasting impact not only on the students, but also on the teachers and also to the school environment as a whole. This is one of the study I conducted on the role of school principals in developing teacher leadership. And there are many mediating variables, definitely. But in this study, I use the academic emphasis. Although we talk about the sustainability and developing leaders or sharing leadership, there is a huge responsibility of the school principals to support a value-based and teacher leadership in the school context. So I'll try to finish my talk within 5 minutes, but it is also important to understand the global agenda for education. And we have the SDG 4 with us, and we are trying to achieve it, and also we have only 5 years to achieve. This is where we need sustainable educational leadership. Many countries, I'm not sure whether most of us will be able to achieve the SDG goals, but we are trying very hard to achieve almost all the different goals set in 2015. But this is the time, again, we need to look beyond 2030. We need to look at 2040 and 2050 as well. This is the time we need all our educational leaders, the school principals, to practice sustainable educational leadership with different types of thinking. We need future thinking. We need system level thinking. And also we need exponential thinking. From my experience, working in the Ministry of Education, working with many school principals, something I realized. Our school principals and many school principals, they don't have a futuristic thinking. They don't try to have a system level thinking. They have a very narrow focused thinking on a very small context, which is their own school. But they must have a futuristic thinking, they must have a system thinking, and when we work as a school principal and when you come back to Ministry of Education as a superintendent or a deputy superintendent or to any other role, this is one of the requirements. What I believe the system thinking is an important requirement for those leaders who come from the school level to system level. Looking at the future schooling, because when we talk about the sustainable educational leadership, this is very much related to the future. We should understand what are the different future scenarios for our schools. This is the 4 OECD scenarios proposed recently about 5 years back in 2020, and they came up with 4 different scenarios. This is the school in extended, education outsourced, schooling as learning hubs, and learn as you go. I'm not going to go into the details of each and every scenario, but we need to visualize, we need to have a future thinking, or we need to come up with models of future schools and future universities. Journey and Grew in last year, in 2024, this is how they conceptualize a model to guide the thinking from the present to the future when we talk about the future universities. So this is all about the present and guiding the thinking from the present to the future, which is for the next practices with a possible, plausible, and probable, and also a preferred future of the universities. This is the last one. If you look at the I already mentioned about the GEM report produced by UNESCO. And in a couple of days, I think tomorrow night, I'll be going to Uzbekistan to attend the UNESCO General Conference, which is going to held in Samarkand. And if you look at this recent report of UNESCO, there are some important statements about leadership in education. And this is the think piece of leadership in education, a piece of work, a background paper prepared by Professor David Grew, based on the GEMS report, and mention some of the important statements about leadership in education. If we look at the statements, there are 7 key elements. The first one is leadership is not one leadership view. It says that there is not a single leadership view that is sufficient to describe the work of educational leaders. The leadership views that better account for complexity and crisis are emerging. And the second one is, the second part of the statement is, but there are leadership views that work in many contexts. That is very definite, that there are some ideas that seems to be applicable widely and for the framework of setting direction, developing people, developing the organization, and improving teaching and learning, which seems to be particularly helpful in understanding leadership actions in a wide variety of contexts. The third one is leadership from many is needed, which is what we talk about distributed leadership. This is what we talk about the shared leadership. It is not only about the teacher's leadership, but it is also about the student's leadership, and also how we engage the community in our leadership. That is something important. The fourth one is the leadership matters, which clearly mentions the leadership can impact substantially on students and school outcomes. Indeed, there is recent evidence that the impact is higher than previously believed. And if you look at the fifth one, that is leadership practices matters, this is something we all should realize, all the school principals, because all the ideas about educational leadership means nothing if we are not evident in practice. We need to practice every aspect of theory and the research and every leadership learning that we receive in each and every training. That is our responsibility to practice with all the different values: integrity, honesty, compassion, care, empathy, and all. So, if you look at the sixth one, it's all about the leadership preparation and development that matters. I have already mentioned about how important it is to prepare teacher leaders. And finally, the context that matters, because educational leaders work in an environment that have many contexts. External to a school are various forces that impact to varying degree and include systems, institutions, education, political, economic, and technological, and socio-cultural forces. And today we know that our world is changing with a lot of technological advances. We are in a complex world. We face a lot of different challenges. Recently, we experienced the crisis, the pandemic crisis as well. So this is the time for all of us to practice sustainable educational leadership, because this complex and contextual landscape means that whilst there are similarities between schools, each school will also be somewhat unique and likely require contextually relevant and sensitive leadership. So before I conclude, I would say that sustainable educational leadership is proactive rather than reactive when we face a new future, when we face a complex world, when we face uncertainty and crisis. So we must be always proactive rather than be reactive to address the challenges. And to conclude, the last keynote speaker mentioned, my colleague mentioned about the long-term thinking and well-being of future generations. This is something really important. And even after the pandemic, we can clearly observe that the well-being of our students and teachers, there are many issues related with that. And even school leaders, we have to, and you have to, face a lot of challenges in these areas as well. So ultimately, we should think of, we should have a long-term thinking, and also we should care with empathy. We should care our teachers and students' well-being more other than now. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad. And then we would love to request Dr. Ahmad to remain on stage, right? Because I think we have time for one question. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. The mic is coming. The mic is coming. This is a very important question because we can open for one question only from the floor. From the floor for Dr. Ahmad.
Thank you so much. Once again. I understood very well is something that I think that is collaborative practices, sustainable leadership. Now, one of the slides talked about the different aspects of professional leadership. I don't remember all of them, but you mentioned that structural leadership, you talked about transformational leadership, moral leadership. I just wonder, bearing in mind which one would you put much emphasis on? I'm because the context of where I come, you may not achieve the goal at one time. Then you have to pick the right thing, which means you have to prioritize which kind of professional leadership that we need for sustainability, because we may not achieve all this. So if I was to prioritize out of all this, where should my focus be most in all these kinds of leadership? Finally, I didn't know about my gifts, but after your presentation, I think I should. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the fantastic question. It all depends on the context, the type of leadership or the leadership approach that you need. But one thing is very clear, because the Millennium Development Goals or the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a very futuristic global agenda. Even in 2015, we came up with SDG 2030 to achieve. But if our leaders, both at school and the system level, if we don't have the futuristic mindset, and if they don't practice the sustainable educational leadership, they wouldn't know what is going to be the long-term impact of what they are doing now. So it all depends, because the schools need transformational leadership, the schools need instructional leadership, and the leaders, school principals need almost all these different leadership styles. But sometimes they forget about the sustainable educational leadership they don't have a future orientation. They look for today, not for tomorrow. So this is one of the challenges that we have to attain the long-term goals. Therefore, we must have a strategic thinking. We must have futuristic thinking. Then only we will be able to achieve the long-term goals. And thank you so much, and I invite all of you to visit Maldives. And there's also something important when we talk about Maldives, because we have our unique language. This language is not used anywhere else in the world. And we also have our own scripts. So, with technology, many of our students, even the young generation, they use the videos from YouTube and all, and there's something alarming. Some of our natives, the young kids, they don't speak in Divehi. So, if we talk about the sustainable educational leadership, it is a responsibility of school leaders to make them literate in Divehi language, to preserve our indigenous language, our native language, when we talk about the future. Otherwise, maybe after 50 years, I don't know what's going to happen to our language if our young generation, if they don't do it. And this language is not used anywhere else in the world. So this is all about the sustainable educational leadership. And then we must have the broad system level thinking for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad. Right. We still need Dr. Ahmad to remain on stage, yeah? Right. There was so much shared, okay, during Dr. Ahmad's keynote. And I think we would love to invite Dr. Ahmad again for a second session then in the future. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad, for such an insightful sharing, focusing on sustainable leadership with the essence of integrating different leadership approaches. I like that, okay, for different contexts. And then with the comprehensive key concept that all of us can use as points of reference to do our future researches later, right? I think we can talk more about the sustainable leadership over coffee and tea later, and we would now call upon our Senior Deputy Director, Training Services Cluster of Institut Aminuddin Baki, Yang Berusaha Tuan Haji Roland Elias Rozaidi bin Abu Hassan, to come on stage and grace the certificate and souvenir presentation to Dr. Ahmad. Tuan Haji, please. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad, for sharing with us. And also, thank you so much, Tuan Haji Roland, for gracing the certificate and souvenir presentation ceremony. Right? Be patient, ladies and gentlemen. We have reached the end of our keynote sessions today, and we would like to keep all of you here for a short while because there are some updates from the Secretariat for all of you. Tonight is a very special night. What is the night tonight? It's the networking dinner for all of you. Because if you do not have the chance to ask more questions, it's okay. All the speakers will be there during the networking dinner, and then we can talk about it during that time, right? So attire-wise, it is actually smart casual or batik, okay? Smart casual batik. And then the networking dinner is going to be at the dining hall. Okay, dining hall, the usual dining hall that we have our lunch and dinner. And also it will start at 8 p.m. tonight. Okay? Right. So any other question that you would love to ask the Secretariat? If none, we would love to invite all the Malaysian presenter and participants to adjourn to the next program, and we would love to keep the international presenter and also participant here in the hall for a short while, because there will be a short briefing on the benchmarking session later on. Okay, thank you so much, and we would love to invite all the higher management of IAB to adjourn to the next program. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, tea is provided at the dining hall.